You guys do a microphone check at all?
Yeah, we just had it off for like 30 seconds.
Joe and Murray.
Murray, yes.
Okay. You guys both local or
Yeah.
Yeah.
Milwaukee?
Been in Milwaukee for about 14 years.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I grew up in East Troy.
East Troy.
I grew up in Lake Geneva area.
Okay.
Yeah. We actually grew up pretty close to each other.
Yeah, we just found that out last week. So we have a little bit of paperwork for you. This is just a consent form.
I can get my glasses. Let me scan this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Kind of the overview of it is just this is going to be used for the field school study itself. Risks and benefits. We'd like to use your name, and then the interview benefits is mostly just that it's going towards the, well, you won't directly receive any.
Where do you want me here?
The research will go towards everything. I think we need here, and then just a date, and then a printed name up there.
Yeah, because you couldn't make out my writing.
And then also to, if at any point you want anything in the interview made public, just let us know. At any point, we can stop.
What do we got? 21st.
21st. Mm-hmm.
Was that it? This one too,
I
okay.
think so.
Audio, yeah. You want a signature there?
Yeah, we'll go with the signature down there.
I'll print first and that's it? Or then again
Yeah, again as well.
on date of interview.
6/21. And then if there's anything we're going along with this question or
Yeah, I'll chime in.
You want my home address or what?
have they been putting their own addresses in
Not now, I think so.
Okay.
I think that's important. It's more or less just the signatures. You understand? Right.
You want the door closed or not? Is she coming or somebody else in
Well,
the
Yeah, we'll close it for now. I don't think Esme is
Esme?
going to come.
She's over there.
I think she was just going to sit and take her lunch here and make a phone call as well. Wonderful. All right.
What is that, audio or video or both?
Just audio.
Just audio.
Yeah, it's just a microphone. To make sure your hair's right.
Nah, I've never been concerned about appearance. I've been mistaken for the janitor often enough. So. Picking up garbage and, you know. All right, where do we begin with this?
I think probably we'll just start with one more time. We'll just start with an introduction of yourself. So if you could just state your name, spell your last name as well, just so we have an actual spelling of it. So we know.
Sure. My name is Reverend Dennis J. Lewis, Lewis. And I'm a diocesan priest with the Archdiocese of Milwaukee and have been so since 1975.
Are you, just kind of give us a history about yourself as well.
I'm a city boy from Milwaukee. I'm the oldest of 9 children. And I grew up on the northwest side of Milwaukee. And my assignments at first was on the west side at St. Anne's, which is no longer in existence, on 37th and Wright. And my first assignment in River West at St. Casimir's, which is on Bremen and Clark. And then 12 years at St. Boniface on Teutonia and Center. And then since 1988 till I think March 30th of this year, next door here at St. Michael's. So,
Alright,
all the time in the city here.
yeah.
So
You said you grew up on the northwest side?
yeah, on about 85th and Nash.
Okay.
And fortunate enough to have remember when nothing was there and it was all fields and that, and then everything grew up in the late 50s. So buildings came in and they paved Lisbon Avenue further west.
So you've seen a lot of change in that neighborhood then?
A lot of change overall, many changes from the Milwaukee Braves to the Brewers. Yeah, it's been a good ride so far. So,
Are you still in that area? Or
no, presently
essentially-
I'm awaiting reassignment
Okay.
and that. But at 67, I'm only not too far from retirement. So I've got about a year to go, and I'll probably fill in and help out at places.
Okay.
So.
All right. Take us through kind of your affiliation with ACTS, the
Okay.
organization. Kind of piece together. We're looking to get sort of a history on where it started, how it started, and bring in like a little bit of your experience.
Like I mentioned, I started here next door at St. Michael's in 1988. Immediately confronted with a growing population of post-Vietnam Laotians, Hmong and Lao, who were in rental situations and were unfamiliar with banks and loans and needed to move from rental situations to ownership. And in, I think it was the summer of 1990, one of the oldest members had her home broken into, and they moved her into a facility, and they were selling the home. And we arranged to have a family from the church who had children buy the place. And at that time, I think John Norquist was mayor of Milwaukee. And John, we made contact with him and told him of the people we were serving and what we were doing and our need for housing, and he connected us with John Worm from the Department of City Development. I personally went down to the bowels of the Department of City Development, and I saw all these little stanchions and stations, and the guy I was supposed to meet with was out in the field, and I said, that's the guy I want. So he moved in freely into the back end of the old rectory next door, into housing over there, and we immediately, he had been working with some of the Hmong down Lisbon Avenue and helping them get started with their homes, and so we connected. And very quickly, about, I think it was 1992, we actually became incorporated as ACTS, and I gave the name to it, Allied Churches Teaching Self-Empowerment. And the whole idea was to get people into home ownership and build equity and start their lives. Because we found out very quickly that children didn't even bring friends home to apartments and to rental situations. The ability to have a garden plot, the ability to have a place to park their cars. And there was no housing market here. homes lingered on the market for sale for years without buyers. And a lot of listers and no buyers. We hooked up with, or we had a situation where some of our people were also involved with a slumlord who had 90 properties that the city or the courts took over. His name was Savage. And we privatized some of those and rehabbed them for our own people. The whole idea was to take an area like we were, where there was only one homeowner or no homeowners on a block, and convert this back to the way it was, with individual homeowners on the lot and people taking pride in their properties, and also having ability to walk to church and be close by. We weren't necessarily parochial and restricting it to only Catholics who went to church next door, but friends, neighbors, word of mouth. And we started to do it by word of mouth, without a lot of hoopla and advertising, because there have been a lot of housing agencies. And a lot of them did a lot of advertising, but did very little product. We wanted to turn out volume, and we wanted people in homes, and we wanted roofs over their heads. And we had a market where I think we started, some of the first houses were $7,000 for the home and property. And we had people who were qualified to do the painting and plastering and minor work. We also connected with local vendors with upgrades for the electrical systems, from 30 amp service to 100 amp service, to help with roofing and new roofs, porches. But we were not so much concerned with rehabbing for cosmetics, because if we did that and put a lot of money into the places, the price was going to be kicked beyond the means of our people. So we started with two mainline banks, which was Marshall and Ilsley and U.S. Bank, and two very important individuals, one who's dead now named John Cleary from U.S. Bank, and the other was Jeff Stocks from M&I. Both of them had the most loans products put out there in terms of WHEDA loans, Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Association loans. And so we worked with them. John developed a new product of intake called the Cleary form, where we considered their food stamps, their assistance, everything, that all the income in the family and everything else, and we translated that into Laotian and Hmong and Spanish and others, so that we could do an intake, and the loan officers would meet with people in the parish office where they were comfortable, and then get them started into banks and into loans and connections. And we had some numerous problems. We had somebody had to pull somebody in from Madison and WHEDA and underwriters, because particularly with the Southeast Asian community, we had this problem. They had no credit. And no credit and no debt meant but loan officers said, well, you don't have any credit history, and we can't give you a loan. But they had good credit in the fact they had no credit. And we had to work with the underwriters on that. We had to work with other groups, particularly the Latino community. And as long as people had they had an ITIN program that allowed them to get loans even if they were not citizens. And so that get them out of rental situations and that. We started here in this area, and because John had moved along Lisbon, and people who wanted to buy around here, and and we set up under John. John worked with Blia, and we got her qualified as a real estate agent. And so she was the first Hmong woman real estate agent in the state.
Sorry to interrupt, but when you say Blia, you mean
Blia Cha. And shortly thereafter, we found out people living on the south side needed this. I said we were in association with some of the other churches. I forget the Lutheran church on South 27th Street. But we were connected with them. We were connected with Prince of Peace and St. Raphael's and some of the others on the south side. And so we connected with Ilaria Rios, who was facilitating in Spanish and in English, and started her out on the road to getting her real estate license. And then Mary on the north side. So we franchised this in different parts of the city where it was affordable to do that, and set her up in an office up in the Harambe neighborhood in River West on 2nd and Burleigh. Ilaria's down on, what is it? I forget the address. It might be National or something like that. And Blia here. They started turning out loan products and putting families in homes to the tune of 75 to 90 to 120 to 150 families a year. And these were poor people on the low end of the spectrum. And our market continues to be poor people, to get them into home ownership and get their name on the title. Unlike Habitat, our people immediately, we have a buyer in mind, we have their name on the title, they take possession, they own it. Habitat is a long process and many defaults to get them into a home.
Mm-hmm. In comparison, speaking to that point, what is the turnaround with ACTS as compared to a Habitat process?
You mean talking about default rates?
Well, from getting somebody that is looking for a home into their home.
It's a very speedy process once they do the intake.
Mm-hmm.
and once they've done their check and credit history and income sources and available monies for down payment, it can go very, very quickly. Then they get a picture in mind of what their loan availability is. Was it $30,000? Is it $60,000? Is it $80,000? Then they go shopping, and we didn't steer them to any particular properties because you can't do that. But we had people who wanted a cheap home that they could rehab themselves and keep the price low, and we had others that wanted listed properties that were pretty well in shape already. And so it runs the gamut, of the buyers. But the buyer is the one who tells us what they want. The profile is normally four and a half people, 5 people in a household for our sales. So they're large, rather large families. And I would say as we began in the first, I think it continues to the present, our people are paying less for their home loan and their monthly note than what they were paying for rent. So right immediately there's a cash benefit to them to own. And secondarily, there's the equity question and their availability to use that as a basis to raise their families, get other loans, and advance themselves in life.
Mm-hmm.
I think to the tune of, I don't know, Mike could probably tell you, I don't have the exact figures, but it's probably around 2,500 home sales, probably 10,000 people with a roof over their head that they own, men, women, and children. I mean, it's magnificent what has been accomplished. There's still a lot to do. But, I mean, our first people were pioneers. If they were the only homeowner on the block, they were targeted by the other people on the block because they owned the place. And then we got a second person on that block and a third person. So we've increased the home ownership percentage-wise in the area. The city benefits because they have people with a 15 or 30-year mortgage that's going to pay the property taxes. We have a residential population that is not in transit, that doesn't move every 30 days. And the Broderick trailers don't pull up at the end of the month, and people are moving constantly. And we have and then people have eyes in the neighborhood and connect with others and put their gardens in. And I mean, it's what the city used to be, so, and what it continues to need to be. So.
When you say that specifically, I know you were saying also two regards. You started up in the 1980s. It was
1992.
1992. But you first came into
Michael's in 88.
In 88. Okay. What was, I mean, even from that time period, what have you seen for the change? You know, when you first came into the neighborhood itself.
The neighborhood was rough. There was a lot of street crime. There was a lot of people being victimized by crime, having their cars broken into, being mugged, and that, and the streets around here have gotten a lot quieter. And we also were able to target them with resident population dealers, drug dealers, and houses that were problem houses, and help work with the city and the police to try to focus on those. Whereas before people were afraid or they didn't care, now they cared because they lived there. Yeah.
At the beginning, how large was your reach? I mean, being in this neighborhood, it sounded as you were taking people in from the actual parish itself, and then starting to get growing. So was it like a 1 to 2 block radius around the area?
I think we focused intensively from originally here, from about 20th Street to 40th Street, which is the east end of Washington Park. From about North Avenue, but not too much north of Lisbon, south to the valley. And so that's the Washington Heights neighborhood, that's this neighborhood, and others.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And then once you were saying too, you started to establish this area, you started to recognize other...
South side, north side, further up, and develop brokers and a model to do that. We still, I think, there's in my vision, there's a market to be done on the northwest side of Milwaukee. But who do we align with? What church do we align with? And where can we put somebody to do that?
Did you, speaking of your vision, did you ever imagine...
I never imagined that it would have grown like it did. I mean, this is hundreds of millions of dollars in loans. The empowerment of 10,000 people. But nobody was doing it. And the real estate agents weren't doing it because there wasn't the market here, and the property prices were so low, they didn't care. They didn't make any money on them. So what we did is start turning out volume with Blia and others, and they made a good living out of it. So we helped even our own people who worked for Axe establish themselves. And we developed local vendors to do fix-ups and roofing and that. So we worked, I think John Worm developed 4 or 5 guys that became contractors. So there's a spin-off of all of these things when this happens. And recently, I mean, the shift now and the market need now is the church next door continues to have immigrants and probably has, I'm saying, 300 to 600 Burmese refugees from Myanmar, different groups, Karen, Karini, Chin, Gao Chin, and their need to get into home ownership and their need to get established. So friends tell friends, whether they're associated with the church or not, neighbors. We've had a little higher profile. The other thing is we wanted to establish a nonprofit. The other nonprofits that were doing housing were owning the properties, and these people were renting. And then they continued to West Side Conservation, ESHAC, I mean, the whole bunch of them. And they all went belly up. Well, our thing was to put people in control immediately of what they were getting. Like I said, the knock on it was didn't have the street appeal, didn't have the rehab to the tune of pricing it out of people's range, but we couldn't even do that with the church. You know, you live within your means, you have a capital improvement project every year, and you knock it off from the worst condition to the better things, and eventually it all gets done. But it takes time. But immediately people were there and in a home. And I walked into them, I mean, I did house blessings in them, and people took out non-bearing walls, made bigger rooms. People did marvelous things with those homes. And that continues to be to the present. So, in recent years, we dealt with the tax deeded issues. As the reset 8 years ago or whatever came through, and the bad loans, and the city was sitting with 2,000, 4,000, 5,000 tax deeded properties that were emptied and boarded up. We entered into a contract with them to deal with those. But it's what a foolish waste of a housing resource when they spend $15,000 to bulldoze the property and make it a green lot versus what they were paying us $5,000 to put a family in the home and make it the tax deeded, put it back on the tax rolls. So there's, we've developed further relationships with different banks. We've had to deal with, the I-10 program going down and the immigration issue. We've had to deal with most of the American population, black and white, where they have bad credit. So we had to develop a secondary credit counseling agency right here and work with people to get them on track to where they could get to the possibility of owning their places. So we've had to deal with a lot of issues. But we've always found pragmatic, practical, and very sensible solutions to them. I started the thing with John Worm, and it's just the baby has gotten very big. Because for the first 5 or 8, 10 years, I don't know, John worked in the back end with Blia, and I was the director, non-paid, and then we had Carl Quindell for many years, and now we have Mike. And they've done terrific work. We had wonderful relationships with foundations. And we didn't want to get into public funds because there's so much red tape with Fed monies and state monies sometimes and stuff, and the city monies or whatever that they have. Most of our monies have come through foundations. Bradley, Greater Milwaukee Foundation, oh God, you name them. You name all the agencies. And the main thing also, the death knell of most nonprofits, was that they had terrible accounting. And they went belly up because their audits didn't come clean. We wanted to be squeaky clean.
with our audits. And that. But I don't know what our cost per unit of production is now, but it's minimal, you know, to get a family in home. So I see this continuing. I mean, this is something, we've had people come and examine the program from other parts of the country. Sadly, there was a group from Oakland who came and examined us and said, this is wonderful, you have these wonderful Midwest housing prices that you can do this. But in Oakland, you know, when it costs us $300,000 to get a modest home together, and that it's hard to get poor people in the homes. So. What else? I don't know. Our primary mission has been housing. We did have a secondary one for a while with the people next door and their kids in educational advocacy. Because we found kids being bullied at school, their lunch money taken. They needed to know. First generation people figure there's standards in education. Well, there wasn't in Milwaukee, in the schools. So to get them to know how they can transfer, how they can get into the best schools and all of that. We did that for several years. But again, back to our primary mission, which was housing and home ownership and pride in what they have. So.
I guess another question would be to kind of walk us. I'm trying to think of another good question. I can't thank you enough for the interview so far. You've done some really great explanation on the back.
Well, we've board development has been another thing. You know, we were very fortunate to have some leaders in the area and in the churches sit on our boards. Eloisa Gomez, Woody Welch, some of those John Lennon now, who was a commercial banker with M&I, and he's introduced us to folks. Kurt Kellogg. We've had some, but most of it, we started out with local pushers and movers and people in the community, and that has grown into funders and foundation people and stuff like that. But again, the work continues. And then they're purchasing in this building and have a much higher profile than being in the back end of a church office. So they're right here on Fleet Street, right in the hood, and doing what they're supposed to be doing. So.
At what point did Axe make the move from the back office
to here?
To here, yeah.
It's only been in the last 2 or 3 years. I don't remember yesterday. I remember today and what's going on into the future. It's hard for me to, other than the great events that have happened in the past, but I think they were paying something for rent over there. They moved over here, paid a little bit more, took over the whole place, and now they're in the midst of purchasing the property. And for years we looked for somebody to do that. So. But like I said, our other people are outstationed on the south side and on the north side, and there's a possible mission on the northwest side, possible mission in West Allis, possible mission in maybe Racine. I mean, this could be duplicated anywhere in the Midwest with its housing prices, Detroit, whatever. I just think it's green, it's economical, it's not wasting, it's conserving, it's doing all of the above. So and our funders have run the gamut of liberal or conservative or whatever. They don't care. As long as we're turning out the product and putting people in homes, fine. We can take credit for that. Boy, been a lot.
I believe it. Yeah. Do you see yourself? I know you.
I'm ex officio right now. I go to board meetings and stuff like that, but I ask the questions nobody's going to ask. We have developed our own revolving loan fund. I'm sure you've heard of that, and John Worm And that thing has grown and grown and grown. That's small, like Calcutta loans to the homeowners at little or no interest and service fees for the $2,500 or whatever it is that they need for the porch or the garage or whatever the situation is. Our default rate on our regular loans with the banks won't tell you that officially because they can't reveal that, but is the envy of anybody. They gave bad loans, Deutsche Bank and all these other places, to people that didn't have jobs and stuff like that. Our default rate, I think, is probably much less than 5%. I think at one point in thousands of loans, we were counting on one hand the amount of defaults. And then when they were in trouble, the banks would call us or the people would call us, and we could see what we could do to rectify it. But sometimes it was a divorce, sometimes it was a family situation, the loss of a job, whatever the situation was. Very, very few. You'd love to have this in Ozaukee County, the richest county in the state. You'd love to have this default rate in Waukesha or some other place. But this is a very doable. We wanted to live within our means, service people within their means, and put roofs over people's heads.
Well said. So
That's why they asked me to. I'm the bullet guy. I come in with the bullets and kind of state the issues.
So at the very beginning of Acts, it sounds like it was just you at the very beginning.
It was just me and John Worm, who was on loan from the Department of City Development. And John had a real estate broker's license and mentored Belia to get started until she got hers, and then two other ones that got theirs. So he signed off on the first, loans and stuff like that as a broker. So we went after we wanted to market the existing houses for sale in the neighborhood, the rehab ones, any way we could do it. Increase home ownership and put it back into perspective. Back in the day, even the flats on the south side with the Latinos and stuff like that. We've got flats and duplexes in the city where unrelated people live above and below each other. Those flats were developed originally on loans to people where grandma and grandpa lived upstairs, or uncle and aunt lived downstairs. And that's where we want to get it back to. In extremely large families, we've taken whole flats and converted them into singles. So, in the Washington Parks area, or Washington Highlands area, there were large homes that were subdivided in World War II for rentals and people, and we've converted those back into what they were originally, single homeowners.
Mm-hmm.
We've dealt with the empty lots adjacent to the properties, got dollar purchases for the lots, so we changed 30-foot lots to 60-foot lots, put fences around the home and have them have a garden and a driveway. Elbow room. It's been wonderful too. And to the credit of all of the employees and to all of the people who make it possible. So.
It's weird with Acts moving forward. You said you've kind of taken a lesser role with it since moving forward. Do you see yourself staying involved?
I can't see myself not being involved. As long as there's life and breath in me. You like to see things continue. And I've been in a situation, and I'm at that age group where we saw things change in the people losing jobs, manufacturing, empty board ups and houses and stuff like that. I want to see, and I've been in churches like that, where churches leave. To see this one next door continue and grow and continue to grow, and to see things in the rest of the city. I mean, then it provides, then there's an impetus for reinvestment from other people. in the business community or others that want, and we don't see that as bad. So, but we're the initiators, and we're a little outside of the box, and have to be very creative with limited resources to start with. But that's the way life is, and you guys probably know that as students.
Very true. Yeah. I guess to kind of revisit too.
Oh, the revolving loan fund?
Um.
I think we're going to see that. My dream would be to see that develop into its own credit union or what do you call it? A credit union or one of those small to develop that and grow that. Because right now, those loans are all paid back, and we recycle it and recycle it and recycle it. So somebody else can take advantage of it. So. You ask, I interrupted you.
No. To even during the kind of the housing crisis and the collapse in later 2000s, kind of that area. How did the Axe families that had previously bought? How did that affect Axe? I guess
Didn't affect them at all. Did not affect them at all. Those people stayed, and their children, as they grew up, came to Axe and or their relatives or whatever, so that they could take advantage of it and move into it. To every downside and to every setback, there's always an upside. And I don't want to do it the Trump way, but there's a way to help people. There's a way to help people through it. What it did do is lower prices, and people took a hit on that. In many areas of the city, it hasn't come back yet. Housing prices have been reset, and that. But if the affordability is there, And the other thing is to redo some of the infrastructure in these homes and re-insulate them and take advantage of the programs necessary to make improvements. So.
Did you want to ask some questions about the building itself?
Yeah.
And his ballot and history?
Who?
Just kind of, we were looking to, because we're also doing the history of the building itself, the convent.
Okay, yeah.
And even of the church too, as they come together.
Right. This facility, this convent had been, basically when I came in '88 was, there was a food pantry downstairs, Frieden's Food Pantry, and I think there was a couple people living here. And then we moved people, families in transition that were just coming into the facility on the road to getting their own places. And we moved all social services. We had an AA group. We had a bunch of things. So we moved all the social services except for Axe out of the house next door and ran the parish and its offices over there and moved all the social services over here. But as you can see, the place is 130 years old, and the parish doesn't have the money to redo the infrastructure here and capital improvements necessary. And many of the nonprofits did not want to touch this either. Many of the nonprofits don't own now, they rent. And they don't want to attach themselves to an area. And that we have been looking for 5 or 6 years to sell the place because it was a insurance drain on the parish. But with Axe in here, and then I think there's a healthcare organization that the Hmong have upstairs, and their access to rehab funds, it sounds like a good future here. The parish, although struggling always with finances and that, because of the large, beautiful infrastructure, but with no insulation and no upgrades, no air conditioning, no other things, the maintenance costs, finds it hard to deal with it. But people took pride in the place. I failed to say that in '88 I came here. The upper church hadn't been touched since 1949. They were meeting in the basement of the church, and they quickly moved upstairs, and we hired our own people rather than pay out $200,000 to somebody else and the money flees the area. We hired our own people to do the painting, the rehabbing, and they took pride in that. They said they wanted to see it continue, and they wanted to see it clean, and they wanted to make it nice. So shortly thereafter, then church was cleaned up and fixed. They wanted their own places cleaned up and fixed. The other advantage is, I've been asked this question: why would you deal with housing services as a pastor? And my response was, why wouldn't I? Because if you have newcomers coming in, you have a resident population, you have people who are going to be here 15 or 30 years. Just makes sense. And I've been in too many churches that have closed. In these beautiful, beautiful places, and so I mean, again, it goes back to the green thing. It goes back to waste. It goes back to all of the other things. So, I really wonder sometimes if this project couldn't be reduplicated in Racine. And like I mentioned, West Allis is under hard times. But we've limited ourselves primarily to our mission has been the city of Milwaukee. But as we see things change on the northwest side, and we're seeing things change on the southwest side, it continues. The circle continues. But there's a mechanism to do something about it. Give you enough information?
Yeah, I mean, is there any do you have any stories about comment? I know it wasn't a comment when you got here, but have you heard anything like how it was used, or how the attic was used, or
Well, like I said, we had people living on the second floor and even up in the attic on the third floor.
back
Back
in the
then.
late 80s?
Late 80s, early 90s. In fact, one woman who lives down the street here on Cherry Street, she and her family lived upstairs, and in a tough neighborhood, somebody went up the fire escape and tried to break in, and she met him at the door with a big machete, and she said, I kill you, chased him away. So where there's eyes and where there's a resident population, people, but when something is empty, people break in and take it. One of our biggest problems has been scrappers, and continues to be. Because they go by with their trucks and they move into a boarded up house and they take the copper and they take the electrical wire and all of that stuff. They leave the water run. We had a house where they let the water run and the house filled up, the whole basement filled up, and there was nothing to be done anymore except bulldoze it and tear it down. We had them pull off the copper downspouts off the church in the middle of the night. So if you notice on the rectory in the church office, halfway up is galvanized, and then above that is copper. We've had people take the lightning rod wire off the side of the church. We've had them break in here once to do that in my history and time here. Unbelievable. But the damage that can be done. And nobody has to prove anything when they go to the scrapyard and say where they got it from. Well, the city was having problems for years with manhole covers that they were taking.
There was a guy in the dumpster across the street
Yeah.
when I pulled in this morning.
Well, if it's in the dumpster, you don't care.
Yeah.
If they're dumpster divers,
Yeah.
you really don't care because that's what you're throwing out.
Yeah.
The problem is when they go into a boarded up property or it's a place that isn't theirs, and we had them take on the convent here. We had them take the electrical service off the side of the building. They went from the pole and snapped the heavy duty lines. It's a 400 amp service, and took the whole pole assembly down. And then that was a big insurance claim to have that all redone and put back up. The Hmong continued to use, and this is part of the condition of the sale of this building, that they can use this for their discussions and meetings and community groups in the bigger rooms down here on the first floor. That's a waiver in terms of the sale of the building, that they continue to do that. It does not during axe hours and stuff like that. But like I said, the more eyes you have in a place, the more eyes you have in a neighborhood, the less things happen. The less destructive things happen. In fact, in the house next door, I mean, when I first started in '88 there was another priest, and he was with me for 6 years. We said, why should we live here in this huge house with 7 apartments, 2 rooms and a bath, 14 bathrooms in the place for the 2 of us, when we have people in the parish, singles, mostly singles, older people in need of housing. So they make a donation every month, and they occupy that place. There's 11 people living next door. When we had somebody in training, because people, when they first came from the refugee camps, I'll tell you a funny story. Lady was using the toilet bowl to wash the rice. And I explained to her, no, that's not for washing rice, that's for defecating. But people not used to indoor plumbing or other things. Language barriers, all the other things. So that's why we had a host family from their community to show them the ropes until they get going. But I have no fears. We have Somalis down the street. Most of them are Muslim. We don't care who buys. If they're going to be a homeowner and they're going to live in that house, and they're going to make improvements to that house, they're a benefit to everybody. And then eventually they start, breaking ice, finding each other's names. Their kids play together. Kids are bringing their friends over for overnights, and because basically kids are smart, and they're the next generation coming up, and they're the heads up for the parents. Yeah, it's been good. So now we're in another transition period with them buying this place, and I think they're going to make full use of it too. But now we have a little higher focus, and there's a little better PR, and but do the job first, do the sales, get the people in the homes, and then put it in the paper. So we have a wonderful relationship with the mayor, the aldermen. They're happy. Wonderful relationship with the police department, because when people own homes, there's not police calls to that house. There's a lot of upsides to everything. I wish they would do a program to evaluate crime and home ownership, and the correlation between home ownership and crime going down. Like I said, I looked at it as a pastor and said, what can I do about the job situation? Not much. What can I do about the crime situation? Not much. What can I do about businesses not around here? Not much. But what do we have? We have all these houses. And we have people that need to own their houses. And we can, they're paying $900 a month for crap now for housing. And they can own a place for $500. And that's $300 a month. Doesn't seem like a lot, but when you add it up over time, it's the beginning of everything for people.
Yeah. Question for you. Do you remember, I know you said your memory, you remember the big ones. Do you happen to remember the first family that you helped with X to get them into a home?
Pangwood, no, but I think it's I want to tell you, the family name has 26 letters in it. Luang Fasanajak. And they're living on the alley on corner house by the alley, right off of Lead here, it's the first house off the alley. And it's a dead-end street here on 21st, 22nd. She would know the exact address. The daughter is a policeman now. Grew up in the house and that, so. Mom is still there. She's a widow now. So, I mean, I've seen people where, there was two families, the kids have grown up now and everything else. The kids live in Waukesha or Germantown or whatever. But mom and dad, what are they going to do? Where are they going to go? So. And now the influx of new people brings new energy to everything. So. And the existing people in Milwaukee who have, we have to get this in people's heads because not everybody can deal with home ownership. We've helped people right along, but some people are so accustomed for generations to being in rental situations that they don't care. They don't know how to paint. They've never had to do this. Those are the ones we struggle with sometimes. Don't realize, how the hot water tank works, and you can't call the landlord anymore because you're the landlord. But we've had them refer back to us for people to help. That's the thing about Axe having a resident place. Is that we're even though we've done the sale, even though we've helped the family buy the home, we're always in a position to be here to assist in anything that goes on. And that's not like most real estate agencies. The private ones are just after they're cut and that's a done deal. They're gone. We're here. And people come back to ask questions or to help other family members. I also have been in places, I would like to see this place. It's been here 132 years. I'd like to see it stay on. Like in Europe, places stay for 500 years. All you really need to do is redo the infrastructure, upgrade the systems. And that's cheaper than building from scratch. I'm sure the builders and manufacturers say, well, it's easier for us to put up a place for $150,000 than to come in and deal with a $1,500 job or a $3,000 job here or there. But then they put it out of the price range of most people's ability to buy. Our market, and Michael could tell you, is probably still in the $60,000 range. And there are a hell of a lot of homes in Milwaukee that you can get for $60,000 or less. So.
That's awesome.
Oh, that's why everybody likes to be involved with it, or has a connection or knows this one or that one. And that's what I'm finding out. It's all about connections. It's all about making it work and networking and being there. But we're here. So we've been here since 92, that's 18, that's 34 years, and 10,000 people. And we'll be here, I guess, like he said, our credit counselor left to take a job at a bank. But the gal she was training has taken her place, and, you know, one goes, another comes, but the job continues. And this needs to be done in every neighborhood, in every city. And it can be done much cheaper than bulldozing and coming in with whole new developments. You know, they've done that on Lisbon with model homes and stuff like that. But doesn't stop, I mean, it doesn't make it any better. And there isn't a market for those people. They can't ask middle income people to come and take, to invest in the city, other than say downtown, you know, the condos, that because middle class people have done that already in certain areas of the city. And then if the underclass in the low end of the totem pole goes belly up, they lose value in their places. They have a bad taste for city living, and they leave. So if you secure the underclass, and if you secure the I don't want to say underclass, but up and comers, and the low end of the economic totem pole, you stabilize everything all the way up. So, again, why do we do this? Why is a pastor doing this? Why, you know, it benefits everyone. Benefits everyone. Again, and then they raise the questions about crime. Then they raise the questions about jobs. Then they raise questions about the educational systems. And then they're, you know, all of the other things start. But they need a roof over their head, a place to call their own. And if we can do that in many areas of the city, I think there's a great deal of hope. Other thing is, you can't go anywhere else. You can't go out to Waukesha, and even though the jobs are there, there's no houses for $60,000 a year, or 60,000 prices and stuff like that. So they go out and get the job, but the job doesn't pay enough for them to pay the home note or the rent, and there's no place for them to live there. Another thing that doesn't make sense for me is all the jobs have moved out to the Beltline. And when I'm a fisherman, so when I go out fishing in the morning and going west and out of the city, I saw all the headlights coming into the city for work. And now the traffic flow is two ways as heavy. Which again is a dumb thing because we spend all that time commuting. But Milwaukee has cheap and short, some of the shortest commute times in the country. So, you got people live in Elkhorn and Lake Geneva, and that commute to 50 miles is nothing, you know. Because they do that in Chicago, and they do it in New Jersey, and they do it into New York and other places with much longer commute times.
Have you seen with Axe coming into the community? Have you seen kind of just like I guess to say like a wave of business development as well associated with it? Or
I think there's the marketing is different than strip marketing as they used to down Fleet Street and down the main thoroughfares. Then it went into malls and things like that. Now it's more regional. Grocery stores and that. I mean, there isn't anybody that doesn't go to a large grocery store that doesn't have to commute 5 minutes or 7 minutes. So I think the question needs to be raised, what are we going to do with the old strip marketing places? They're going to knock them down and make them residential? I think that's what they're doing in some cases. But there's renewed interest in avenues west and Wisconsin Avenue. The guy with the old Knickerbocker and that has put a lot of money into things, and things have been upscaled there. The state has developed an office on 27th in Wisconsin. So there's some new things I also was in Merrill Park at St. Rose, so I was fortunate to have people that lived in Merrill Park and down in Pigsville that would rent their parking lots to the Brewers, to people coming in for Brewer games. So, because their population that goes to Brewers games do not live around here. Same with the population that goes to Bucks games does not live where it's going to be. So. Yeah. Doesn't make sense to me. What a reversal. Somebody asked me once also, so what are you going to do? I mean, if they bought the places at $7,000 or $30,000 and now they're $60,000 and they sell, I say, so what? That's their decision. You talk about gentrification? Those row houses in Baltimore or Washington, so what? If they take, then they get the $120,000 and they get the advantage and they can move on. It's their choice. Gentrification isn't bad. But gentrification is not going to happen in this city anytime soon. East Side is flourishing. Bayview is flourishing. Name another place that where market prices are going up. They're not. So. And immigration and immigrants are fine. They're great. They give more than they produce more and give out more than they consume. And then it raises the question with Americans who have been here all of their lives about, well, how can they participate in what they think they've been denied? Yeah, it's fun. You get a kick out of seeing somebody else get ahead. And that's what ACTS is about. Seeing someone else have their name on it and be responsible, get ahead and get started with life. So that's what makes it worthwhile. Yeah, it was a brain fart that worked. It's a lot of, begs the question. I think Michael said they just got money from the Koch brothers. They're not giving it to Trump. So we don't care. Conservative, like I said, or politics or whatever. If you've got a solid product and it's turning out and it's developing people, a lot of people want to be participating in that. So. And our brokers have made a good living for themselves. She's going to retire, and she's made a good life. They've had 6-figure years. And that's just on the co-brokering and the little fees they get for their... And they also have their mission. But we can see trends develop, where the mission, where the market is, where people want to go. And now, with the Latinos, they want to go on the southwest side. At one point, it was up to West Milwaukee and 43rd Street, and Miller Park. Now they want to go south and west all the way to the Waukesha line. We've seen the Hmong community develop itself and go northwest, like others have in Milwaukee, all the way to Menominee Falls. The housing stock isn't that great out there, but it's where people want to buy. But the connections are here. And there's something to be said for a long-term presence. And not washing your hands of the deal as soon as it's done. So. And family kind of, it's got a family attitude. So. Okay guys, that's enough, eh?
Can't thank you enough for your time. It's been wonderful. I get to talk and get the history here from you.
You gotta write this stuff? God. Is this a paper or something you have to produce?
This is going to
A
go.
compilation of different
It's
things.
a compilation of stories going in together. So, thank you so much for your time.
Hey,
Can't
no
thank you
problem.
enough.
You see Michael.
Still in there? Michael?